Seashore.
1 second. Forget on YouTube. It's loud, recording in progress.
All right, let's go ahead and get this meeting started. This is going to be a Lake Stevens City Council workshop tonight. We're down at the mill and we are recording this workshop and we'll post it on our YouTube channel later. So with that, we'll call the meeting to order. Council President Donahue is going to run the meeting, but to start off with, we are going to have guest business, actually not a guest, chief business, call it chief business. For swearing.
Thank you, Mayor. It is my honor to do this promotion to Dean Thomas. Dean has been working very hard this past year, going through Northwest School of Police Staff and Command, which is kind of compared to the FBI Academy. It is online. It's 22 weeks. If he would have went in person, it had been about 10. He took the longer route, but he was very successful with that. He built some great networks, partners across the United States, and a couple of regional partners here doing this class of people that have taken before him. So I'm going to read a little bit of his bio, and then we will let his daughter, Harper, who's here, gets to pin his badge onto him, and then the mayor will swear him in. So Deputy Chief Dean Thomas grew up in Everett, Washington, as a graduate of Western Washington University with a bachelor's degree in business management and sociology. In January 2005, Dean was hired by the Everett Police Department as a patrol officer. In March 2006, he lateraled to the Lake Stevens Police Department and served as a patrol officer. In December 2011, he was assigned to the investigations unit where he investigated child sex crimes and was a member of the what's called the Snohomish Multi-Agency Response Team, which is SMART Team, and was a member of the Interlocal Child Abduction Response Team, which is called ICART. He was promoted to sergeant in January 2017, overseeing a patrol squad, the agency's registered sex offender coordinator, and the Explorer commander. On April 1st, 2022, Dean was promoted to operations commander. In 2025, Commander Thomas graduated from Northwest School of Police Staff and Command. And on September 16th, I had the honor to promote him to deputy chief. With that, Harper, you ready? All right. Mayor, if you can come over, we'll swear him in. Yeah. Chance to stab your dad.
Are we okay on being able to see Caitlin on the video?
We might have to move over this way, Mayor. You're a little bit over here.
Okay.
Right. Come on this way. Good, that keep coming. Dean's off camera. All the way over here. There you go, guys.
All right, cool. So raise your right hand. I, Dean Thomas.
I, Dean Thomas,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will support and defend
that I will support and defend
the Constitution and laws
the Constitution and laws
of the United States
of the United States
and the state of Washington.
and the state of
The
Washington,
ordinances of the city of Lake
the
Stevens
ordinances of the city of Lake Stevens,
and the mission and regulations
and the mission and regulations
of
of
the Lake Stevens Police Department,
the Lake Stevens Police Department,
and that I will faithfully
and I will faithfully
and impartially perform
and impartially
and
perform
discharge the duties
and discharge the duties
as the Lake Stevens Police Deputy Chief
as a Lake Stevens Police Deputy Chief
according to law.
according to law
To the best of my
to
ability.
the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
This part of this, yes, he'll have to go around, but actually I just want to really present this to Dean also. As part of this is succession planning, we do the promotion certificates. I just wanted to bring this tonight as we present this to Dean as part of his promotion, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
Now, photographer.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now you get to walk.
Congratulations. You.
What's their? You. Dean, did you have anyone other than your daughter here?
My sisters Denise and Diane.
Love it. Thanks for being here. And thanks for supporting always, all right?
And a lot behind it.
Oh, and the crew behind? Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
Oh, and the fire.
Cool. All right, great. President, you have the helm.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. All right, that brings us to item 3, department report, claims and, actually here, I'll give it a minute here, just in case. Not gonna hold anybody hostage.
I miss.
All right, that brings us to our claims and loss update with Max. Take it away, Max.
All right, 1 second. I'm just going to share my screen here.
Yes, yes.
All right. Good to go?
Go.
I was asked to give a brief overview of our claims that we suffered recently. First slide here, we're looking at what happened in 2025 so far. To date, we had a total of 21 liability claims. When we look at the grouping, we can see we had 5 that fall within the public safety area, 11 general liability ones, 4 auto. We didn't have any employment practices claims, and we had 1 errors and omissions claim. So far, our insurance paid out roughly $12,000 in indemnity. However, there are still 5 unresolved claims. And I did already present the open lawsuit to council a few weeks ago. Just for general understanding, maybe what are public safety claims? These usually revolve around police practices or damages that occur due to police responses. General liability claims are usually property claims that have often to do with trees of one sort or another, or mowing operations, street mowing operations, and that kind of sort. Auto liability is self-explanatory. If we move on and look at the little bigger picture of what did our claims look like in the past 5 years, we can see that the number 1 claim is a general liability claim. We had roughly over 50 of those. We also had public safety claims. While we didn't have that many, those were the ones with the higher payouts in indemnity. We had some auto liability, and we had very few employment practices and errors and omissions claims, and also very little payouts in that area. If we look at that little table on the right-hand side, that kind of shows us what our insurance would think our claims should be. WCIA groups us together with similar jurisdictions and then determines how many claims we should have in a certain period of time. And when we look at that, we can see that our claim count for some of those claim categories, especially general liability, is higher than the projected number assigned by WCIA. However, our payouts are very low, so they're far below what WCIA would expect. The only uncertainty that is the unresolved claims, including the lawsuits that are still pending that could change that fact. But overall, our payouts are very low. And we can also look at that at the longer history where we see what our insurance paid out in liability. And we can see that in the last, I would say, 5 years, our payouts have been at a very low level, despite the fact that we might have a little higher claim count per se. If we move on from liability claims, we also had some, in 2025, we had 10 auto physical damage losses. So basically city vehicles that had to be repaired. They amounted to roughly $50,000 in repair costs so far. Due to our insurance, we could recuperate all but $10,000, which were the I'm blanking on the word now, but the
Deduct-
deductible, thank you. This year we had no covered property losses, but that doesn't mean we didn't have any losses. We did have 15 uncovered losses with an estimated damage of $143,000. Now, that high number is mainly due to a single loss of a copper wire theft from a streetlight section in, I don't know exactly where, but I think Lundin Parkway or so. If we ignore that, we had some $43,000 in property damages that vary from fence damages to street signs to smaller repairs that are either below our deductible with our insurance, which is $5,000, or it's uncovered property. City property is only covered if it's on the insurance schedule. So we cannot have every single fence and every single guardrail on that schedule. To date, we recuperated some $15,000 through external insurances from drivers that have insurance. 8 of those cases are still pending. Unfortunately, that's a very slow process working with these insurances, but I expect to get another approximately $20,000 back for some of those losses. And that was the brief overview. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them.
Just out of curiosity, on your little graph there, it seemed like 2008 to 2014 or something. It was like, wow.
There were some higher losses there, yes. I would have to look up what the cause was, but I can report back to you if you're interested.
Especially 2008 was huge.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to what was going on. I mean,
I'm not sure if I can look it up right now, but I can look it up during the next presentation and then get back to you in 5 minutes if that will work for you.
sure.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
This is really interesting information. I don't ever remember having this be presented to council before. Is there a reason this year why we're getting this information?
We have presented it, I think, last year or the year before that.
Okay.
And other than that, the reason was why I'm presenting it right now because it was requested.
Okay.
I'm not sure by whom, but Jean, thank you.
Thanks, Jean.
Well, we had quite a few things going on. I just want to make sure.
Sure.
It was one of the follow-up items from the retreat too.
Okay, great. And then is there anything in terms of for council's
Really locked.
awareness, anything that you are looking for from us or any
No,
concerns you think that we need to be aware of?
No, I'm not looking for any action items. I just wanted to bring this to your awareness. I think overall, there's no reason for concern with these regular claims. I think the lawsuits that I presented to you a few weeks ago, those were, they had the potential of a bigger impact. But these claims are just, overall, we're doing solid compared to other jurisdictions in our risk pool.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I'm curious, have we done any sort of analysis about what we're paying for insurance versus what we have, I guess, what they've covered, kind of our net gain or loss on the policy?
Well, we did a pretty thorough analysis of our insurance provider last year. We did it together with Jean and the mayor. I cannot, off the top of my head, I do not remember the exact number that we got out and we paid in. On the long run, especially if we look at those bigger claims from 2008 and 10, my gut feeling would tell me that it's money well invested. But if you want exact numbers on how much we got out and paid in, I would have to put that together for you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not necessarily interested in exact numbers. It's more just kind of, as we think about budgeting, I don't know if it'd be worth considering some kind of self-insurance scheme, if that's even allowed. But if we're looking good, and we could do that.
Truthfully, our decision ultimately amongst the management and was to stick with our insurance provider, WCIA, as they're a very reliable partner. And it's simply we can do the best we want and prepare and try to be as safe as we want, but you cannot foresee and prevent every loss. And when the time comes, I think it's very valuable from a financial standpoint to have a good insurance. We hear from other jurisdictions that our insurance shares with us. There are odd cases out there where payments that go to court and then settlements are for millions and millions of dollars that could have a massive impact on the city budget, I think. So I think that
Thank you.
And in that market, there's only two insurers left in Washington. There's only WCIA and AWC has RMSA. So those are the only two city insurers in the state.
Okay.
And there's no tort claim cap in Washington state. And so it can be very scary, you know, there, you could make one mistake and have a $15 million claim.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot to be done in that arena. Any other questions for Max on the subject?
Thank
All
you.
right, you want to hit the next one there?
Yeah.
You're up again, right? Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. I'd say it's Max with the,
again,
yep, we're moving on to 4A discussion items, Sunoco, DEM, ILA, potential funding and service changes.
I do not have a presentation for this one. I just wanted to bring this issue to council for awareness at this point. As you might know, we're in an interlocal agreement with Snohomish County Department of Emergency Management, and they're providing emergency management services to the city. Those are things like planning support, training and exercises. They coordinate response effort if it ever came to it. They also coordinate emergency management worker, and they provide staff and equipment if we ever needed it. Now, a few weeks ago, the department director, Lucia Schmidt, contacted us and said that she had to inform us that there is a potential funding issue coming up with them. They have some 5 full-time employee hours that historically have been financed through a grant, specifically emergency management performance grant. And due to changes in this grant, it is uncertain whether that grant will be available past September of this year, 2025. So what DEM did so far is they made adjustments that they have funding so that they can keep the staff until the end of the year of 2025 till December. But if until December, it would become true that this grant funding is not further available, then DEM would have to make some changes. And there are certain options. Option 1, obviously, is the easiest one. They increase the member rates. However, that would be a fairly significant increase. In order to maintain the current service level, they would have to increase our annual contribution by 33%. That would be an additional $19,000 a year. And we're already paying $59,000 a year for their services. Option 2 would be to reduce their services. What Director Schmitz suggested would be to cut any kind of support and supplemental planning that would include earthquake annexes, volunteer management annexes, and mitigation planning. And they would also reduce non-emergency outreach. And then the option 3 she suggested is a combination of the both of them. Now, at this point, it is not clear if that grant funding will not be available. It's my understanding that DEM is working closely in trying to get that funding, but a decision will be made in the next few weeks. The next step will be DEM has an advisory board meeting on this topic on Thursday coming up, and the mayor will attend this meeting as well. And I assume we will get more clarity on the grant funding and possible pathways forward on this after Thursday. I just wanted to bring this to council's attention that there is a funding gap with one of our ILA partners and that we will have to make a decision on, and the mayor will have to vote, I assume, or make a decision on how to move forward if funding would fall short for DEM.
Hey, Max, I just want to make sure that your numbers are right. So they do have funding through December of 26?
25.
Okay, because it says 26 in your report.
I apologize, that's a
Okay.
typo, then I will
Okay.
make that correction.
I thought it was 25. I just
No,
want to
it
make
is
sure.
25, yeah,
Okay.
This is the grant that you're talking about, is it federal grant or a state grant?
federal grant.
So what this is it's a federal grant that's being held back because of the fight between our county executive and our state government with the White House administration over sanctuary state status. So I don't think that the citizens of Lake Stevens should pay for that fight. That will be what I will be talking about Thursday at this meeting, that that's not our fight. And if you want to fight a White House, you want to fight an administration, then you got to figure out how you're going to make up those funds. And it shouldn't be from my citizens.
I have a question. Can you, I read through the packet and I have an understanding of what DEM does countywide. Can you talk a little bit about tangibly what would we not have? What would the citizens of Lake Stevens not have if there were the service cuts that are being proposed?
When it comes to the first category is supplemental planning I mentioned. One of the plans that are in this category would be the hazard mitigation plan. The hazard mitigation plan is currently being developed for the county. And historically, it's the ILA partners had jurisdictional annexes into this main plan. These plans are up for renewal every 4 or 5 years, I think, and actually coming up for renewal now, meaning we should renew our annex next year. Now, besides the fact that that's proper practice to have these plans, the hazard mitigation plan specifically is a requirement for a lot or for certain FEMA grants. So if we would not have this hazard mitigation plan, we could potentially lose out on potential funding. Now, this is how it has been in the past. There are so many changes going on, especially with FEMA and with all of those grants, that I do not know exactly how this will be in the future, but that would be a tangible impact that I could think of. As the same goes with all the other annexes that have not been developed yet. During the COVID periods, DEM was very focused on obviously COVID response, and therefore they did not necessarily have the capacity to move all of those other plans forward and update those plans. And the same goes for the for the jurisdictions that are part of that. So for us, we do have planning gaps that we should fill. And the support from the county and DEM is very valuable in that. We can see that with the mitigation planning or also the CEMP, which we're currently transitioning into a county annex as well.
So I have a follow-up question on that. The FEMA grants that would be at risk, are they not already in jeopardy based on the same issues with the federal funding?
That's what I'm saying. I'm not 100% certain,
Okay.
but the one I'm specifically thinking about is the public assistance grant, which is one that came in when there were like losses due to a windstorm or something similar where jurisdictions could apply. Honestly, I do not know the details of the grant requirements. I would have to look that up and get back to you.
Okay, because yeah, that's something I'd be curious about. If that funding is already in jeopardy anyway, then are we really losing it?
Yeah, and Mayor and Council, the reality is we're stuck with DEM. And I don't use that pejoratively, it's that we're stuck with them. So this Washington State deals with one organization per county. And so I think it was about 2013, 2014, there were some windstorms in Linwood, Mount Lake Terrace, Edmonds, had ESCA, which was their emergency services coordinating. They went to file with FEMA, and FEMA said, we got to go through the state. And the state said, who are you? Because they weren't going to the county government. So they ended up not being able to get the reimbursement they wanted because they weren't following the rules.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we get to have an ILA with the county, I guess is what I'm saying. And unfortunately, we get to express what you just articulated, or we get to pay more, or we get to say, no, we'll take less service.
Yeah. We'll have to put that in the calculus machine and see where it goes. Yeah.
Okay, anything else on that, Max? Any other questions? Oh, sorry, what was that?
I have nothing to.
I do have one more quick question.
Oh, okay.
If it comes to whether or not we are a part of the ILA, that would be a council decision, correct?
I think that would be a council decision, yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
Mhm. All right, that brings us to item 4B, Public Safety Sales Tax Ordinance with Deputy Chief Thomas. And then is Julie here as well? No, okay.
So between Dean and I will answer the question.
Okay.
Dean has taken this project on, and I just want to publicly thank him for the work that he did while I was on leave to be able to get this to you. What he's going to follow up tonight, thank you. Follow up on tonight with some of the questions that you had and with the spending, the location and how much the funds are and where we're going to be spending it. So I'll turn it over to Dean as his first project.
Thank you. So as we talked about in the retreat, it's a mandated, what we would use it for is mandated costs for defense attorneys and prosecution attorneys, and then whatever would be left from that, which without Barb here and projections, what that 10th would look like. I know she threw out some numbers out there, but it would be not a lot for the police department after those two expenditures. So basically, defense, prosecution, and whatever is left, we would use for hiring. Or we could use for, like we use, have a DV coordinator, it's called bridge coordination. We could use it for that as well, or in lieu of. So
I can answer those questions that you have for funding. So it was originally put out at about 800,000. The Barb changed her numbers to about 700,000. The prosecutor bill is about 200, little over 206,000. And the defense attorney bill has now gone up to 300,000. So you're looking, or excuse me, 400,000, because it's $606 total $1,000 to fund both of those. And that's coming out of your general fund. So out of the 750 left over, I can tell you how much of that math is and how much is left over to do the DV advocate.
All right, any questions?
But that would alleviate money out of the general fund, though.
Yeah.
Yes,
But not money that's currently coming out of the general fund.
it's coming out of the general fund to pay those bills.
Yeah.
You're paying your
This-
prosecutor's office and your defense attorney.
What are the
Public
current, you said it's going up to 200 and 400,000.
Yeah, so it's about 606,000
What-
for both of those.
What was it this last year? How much of an increase is that? That's
It's for 3% for the prosecutor, no, 4% for the prosecutor's office, 3% for the public defender's office, I believe, or vice versa. It's 3 and
I think it's,
4%.
yeah.
is the amount of the
Yes.
increase.
Is
So
there
we're-
a dollar
I'm
amount?
sorry. So we're already paying, that's been part of the general fund. We were already paying that out of the general fund, and we have been, except for that 3 or 4% increase.
Yes, so we don't handle those contracts because of conflict of interest. So the public defender is handled by Barb and the prosecutor's office is handled by Jean.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure I understand. What we're talking about is imposing a tax to cover a cost that by and large we've been paying for already.
Yes.
Thank you.
And is there a dollar amount attached to the percentage increases? Like what's the actual increase in dollar amount?
Yes,
that you-
Barb has those. I don't have
Okay.
those.
So,
I'll check on the public defender. So right now, what they've notified us of is that we're gonna need 1.7 or something like that, more FTEs to do the public defender work. So it's an attorney and a half essentially. And so that number, like what they've kind of kicked around is about 120,000 per attorney per year. And so I think it's higher than 3%, but we don't have a contract from them yet. We've talked to them on the phone. They've not provided anything. So once we have that, we'll bring that back. But I'm gonna say it's gonna be higher than 3% on this.
Yeah, Barb put us this here, 400,000. Like Jean said, no contract yet. So that has to be negotiated. The prosecutor said at a 3% increase for now, but we had to correct her because it is a 4% in the contract once we found that. So about 600,000 annually for both.
Any other questions? Nope. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
So our question is, do you want us to bring back this for a vote next week? We have a lot of staff time going into this because we have to comply with CJTCs. We have to do a lot of data polling and
How does,
filling up
the-
packets and stuff like that. So
how does the payout, how does the collection start? If they do it this quarter,
75 days after, we have to notify the Department of Revenue, and then you can start pulling it, I believe, January or February.
they start receiving funds January, February?
Yep.
I thought it wasn't until April.
It might be because of the timeline that we're at, but it's 75 days from the time that the vote goes in. We have to notify DOR, and then it's right after that. So there's a timeline. It might be in there that has a timeline for April, Mayor, in that packet.
And
Yeah, so in the back of this, it says July 1.
Okay.
If we notify them by Jan 1.
because how long did we have to approve this? Wasn't there a window?
2027.
Something, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, June of 2027. And we also have to be in compliance with CJTC, which we're doing. We have to pull our policy. I mean, there's a lot of legwork that we have to do to pull policies and send all that draft so they can review all this stuff. So we have our support services sergeant pulling all that. Some of it got pulled this morning, and we're sitting down because there's a lot of data entry and stuff we have to do with this.
Okay. So I guess just kind of unofficial head count here. I mean, is this something we want them to bring back? Do we want to discuss it more?
I just, quick question. This grant, the CJTC grant, you have to pass this tax in order to qualify for that grant.
Yes.
Correct? How many, I mean, what is the magnitude of that grant? It just says to hire additional officers.
Or public safety, yes. That's so it's 100,000, 100 million that the legislation put into that. They're thinking about 125,000 per position. So
I guess what impact would it potentially have for Lake Stevens? Would you have the ability to maybe hire 10 police officers or 1?
well, it depends because then after the 2 years of funding, you're going to have to fill back that funding. So
Right.
Say that again. If we get the grant,
the grant
It
grant
covers
here,
2 years?
2 or 3 years, yes.
2 or
It's,
But we don't know the magnitude of that grant though.
no, we don't have any idea of how much.
$1,000?
Yeah, well, yeah,
5 million.
right.
and
Because every
either wa-
agency is putting in for it.
And either way, in 2028, we have to figure out how to fund that without that grant.
Yep.
So it's a bridge to something.
Or a bridge to layoffs.
Well,
Well-
that's something. Chief, you know, I'm a total proponent of the police department. It just seems premature to have a discussion next week about taxes when we're still in a cloud of what the budget is.
For what it's worth too, I'll say Councilmember Ewing expressed his support for the police, but also thought that the timing on a new tax might not be great right now. So for whatever that's worth, I'll throw that out there.
So what I would suggest is, maybe we roll it into the overall budget decision. So that we still make that decision this year, but we put it in as a whole package, with inclusion in the budget.
It just delays the process, but does it jeopardize the potential for applying for this grant?
It doesn't jeopardize that. It just pushes a little bit of the time that we would receive the money.
Okay.
Can the grant be used for anything other than salaries and wages?
It could be for hiring, can't be for getting lateral officers. That's the, don't
Given
go
our,
get lateral officers
Yeah.
from other agencies. So
given our, just our current budget situation, obviously we don't have crystal balls. I feel nervous about encumbering costs that we don't know how we would pay for.
The reality of this tax, this 800,000 is, it's going to plug a hole.
I'm sorry, not the 800,000, the grant
Yeah,
dollars,
right.
that part.
And that would be a separate subject, right?
Sure.
Do we really want to take that grant money and know that we're going to have to cover those costs down the road? So that would be,
it's another discussion.
yeah, absolutely.
And it almost seems like if we can't, or for whatever reason, we basically hired and trained a new officer and then watched them walk out the door when we can't afford to keep them. Am I wrong in that?
Nope.
Okay.
Well, but I mean, that new officer could be within the budgeted officers,
Could be.
right? Like, it doesn't have to be number 37.
No.
It could be one of the 36
Five, we
we
have-
have, 35 we
one
have
of the five we have
allotted,
open.
right? Yeah.
Chief, I think you made the comment, we have 10 or 11 folks that have the ability to retire in the next 5 years.
Yeah, so out of 50 employees, 22 have less than 3 years on. 11 of us can retire any day.
You can't retire.
Already done it once.
He can't. stay
Yes.
away.
Yeah, I
So
thought
that's
that
where your state of your police department is right now. So
I think we need to put an
Ma-
ordinance in for councilmatic review of those things.
Mm.
You know, so they can't retire without
Yeah.
us saying, yeah.
Mayor, can you talk more about your idea about rolling this into the budget?
I think instead of just having a singular vote on it, and I think it's much more of a budget discussion, right? I think that this is a tax that needs to be, I want to say like a catch up, right? Like we haven't done any specific public safety revenue sources, right? Or prosecutor revenue sources. And so this 800,000 is really to like catch the budget up in those expenses, and not even catch it up, but like plug a little bit of the hole. And I think that we can roll the discussion of whether or not to do this tax as part of that. How do we reduce the deficit discussion in the budget? Is that making sense?
That helps me understand. Yeah.
I think it'll be easier once we get an actual dollar amount. So everybody wrap their brain around how much that would be. Because either way, we do the tax or not do the tax, we're still paying a lot more for defense and for prosecution. So it's gotta come from somewhere. And right now it's just general fund, so it's sucking from everywhere. But like I said, it was a mandate from the Washington State Supreme Court that there's more defense attorneys get hired. So everybody kind of shares the load on that one.
Well, I don't disagree that this is a budget conversation as you're putting it. But I would agree that this is a highlighted thing that has to be, you know, kind of separate. I mean, we can talk about it in the budget and what it does to the budget and what it does for the shortfall, but it's still going to be a separate vote on, are we going to
Sure.
councilmatically put this?
Yeah, and I think we do a separate vote during the budget to do the, the 1% or the 1
Tenth of a
the prop-
percent.
The
Yeah.
property tax increase. So
Oh, yeah, that. too.
It'd be the
Yeah.
same kind of an idea.
The same thing. Okay.
Sure.
It sounds like either way, you guys don't have to worry about putting it together for next week.
Yeah.
okay.
All right, thank you. Okay, that brings us to item 4C, Critical Areas Ordinance Update Introduction with David Levitan, who I don't see. So I'm guessing, Russ, are you taking that one?
Yeah, I'll be taking that item tonight. I have to pinch hit, so we'll see how it goes. Can you allow me to share? Okay.
Mhm.
Stop. Lose cell service, please.
Okay, thank you, council. So I'm going to run through a brief slideshow tonight and pause for questions along the way. So as you know, the city is required to update its critical areas ordinance every few years. This usually follows your update to your comprehensive plan. Make sure you have best available science. Critical areas as defined in state law include wetlands. They include critical aquifer recharge areas. So that would be in addition to our code this year, frequently flooded hazard areas, to geologically hazardous areas, and to what are called fish and wildlife habitat conservation areas, or streams and rivers, to make that easy. So our last critical areas code was updated in about 2019. And it was also brought into our shoreline management program and as Appendix B. And as I've already mentioned, we have to show best available science when we do these updates. And some of the science between now and our last update have changed a little bit. And that's where I'll try to focus on most of the attention tonight. So the first thing we did is we had hired a consultant and we did what's called a gap analysis. So they went through the state law and the different manuals that the different agencies have in place to compare our critical areas code to the literature. We've done pretty well on that. And then they follow that up with the best available science review. And again, they compare the code we have to see how science has changed. As we go through this, we're going to talk a lot about how the science for stream management and stream management buffers have changed in the interim. The previous iteration of our code, several versions of our code have relied on the Department of Natural Resources, water typing, which have been seasonal or perennial streams. They've also been all the way up to fish-bearing streams or waters of the state. And all of those received different buffers. So the current model that they are proposing, and this largely comes from the Department of Fish and Wildlife, would use a riparian buffer analysis and looking at that in a couple of ways. And one of those would be based on tree height. We'll come back to that. Good news, most of the changes we're going to do are pretty minor. So going through, cleaning up the language where the state statutes may have changed. And there's some examples provided. We want to make sure that our code aligns with the state law and requirements, reflects best available science. We can say that there's really not a lot of work to do in our frequently flooded areas or our geologically hazardous areas, minor updates to our wetlands. We want to clean up some of the language and we need to put a little bit greater emphasis on habitat corridors. It's much closer. And as I mentioned, the biggest change will be to our stream buffers. So the recommended management style now is to consider a riparian management zone. So that's the buffer around a river or stream. And the methodology that the Department of Fish and Wildlife is recommending is based on a tree height. So looking at a 200-year-old tree to sort of set what that base buffer should be. And that's a pretty flat recommendation across the board with their regulations. However, they do allow alternative science. And that's what we've been exploring with our consultant and looking at what some of the other cities have been doing. Specifically, the city of Woodinville has gotten through with an alternative analysis methodology, and we'll talk about that. And before I go on much further in your packet and in the slideshows, I just want to give a shout out to Cameron McTee, our intern. He's been a great help to us as we've gone through our critical areas code update and some other updates. And one of the big projects he took on was a complete update of our critical areas atlas, which is a tool based on all of the critical areas reports that we get in, and we truth those against the regional data set. So he's done a tremendous job and appreciate the work that he's done on this project.
Cool.
So the potential alternative buffers. So instead of just using this tree height measurement, you can, DFW has essentially said that 150 feet to 100 feet is about as low as they can go if you're showing site-specific analysis. So what they've shown in their literature review is your most functional buffer happens in about 100 feet of that critical area. And then the wider the buffer, you get about 90% of your function in that 100 feet and then diminishing returns as the buffer gets wider. So what we would like to explore is do this alternative buffer where in most of our smaller streams, we go straight to this 100-foot buffer. And then in some of our larger streams, we would like to go to this 150-foot buffer with the potential then to do further buffer reductions based on a mitigation strategy. One of the things that we've identified that DFW doesn't really consider in their model in urban areas is the effect of stormwater management. That's really not calculated. They're just looking at sort of a raw land, pre-development condition. But in urban areas, through stormwater control, we have to consider the built environment. And so we really want to understand how they've considered other ways to treat pollutants in and around streams. But that's essentially the approach that we want to go for, is to do the alternative method, smaller buffers, and any further reduction or increase would have to be shown on a site-specific level using an analysis of that site. And some of the maps just sort of tell that story, what the difference between those different buffers would look like.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What is the motivation for looking at alternatives versus following the recommendation, the riparian recommendation?
Sure. The biggest concern, and that's actually council's direction to us, but the biggest concern is Lake Stevens and a lot of other urban cities, we have limited buildable land. And if we do the suggested 235-foot or 200-foot buffer on every type of stream in the city, that's going to significantly diminish our remaining buildable lands capacity. I don't have that number in acreage for you. I don't know if that's something you've charted. Cameron, what's that?
Would be that.
Okay, that's something we can bring back, but that's
Cameron's got it.
that's what the impact is, and that goes back to lots of discussions we've had in the past.
And so is that like the only reason, the primary reason? Are there other factors, or that's why we're looking at?
That
reason.
is, I would say, a primary reason that we're considering that and bringing that to council based on years of working with this council. But I would also go back to, as they've done the literature review, if the efficacy of the buffers in that first 100 feet, then adding on another 100 feet or quadrupling size of buffers, what's the trade-off in that case? If we have other tools like stormwater vaults, swales, and can go in and plant those areas and remove invasive species, that I think we would get a better bang for our buck, maybe with that smaller buffer. So that's sort of the practical reason of it.
Okay.
But just again, based on the guidance and the conversations we've had with councils over the years, very sensitive to our remaining buildable lands. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thanks.
Okay.
Russ, where does the 235 feet start?
It would start at what's called the ordinary high water mark. So that is the highest point that the stream may be at during the year.
So that could be in the middle of the stream, or is it on the edge of the?
It's on the edge of the bank going up the stream somewhere.
So you're not really talking about 235 feet, you're talking about 470 feet.
Well, from the entirety of it, yes, on each side would be that 200 or 235 feet. So
Okay,
Which puts the buffer behind my house and on Lake Drive.
in your living room.
Yeah, past my living
Yeah.
room.
yeah, to the lake.
Assuming your stream width is less than a foot wide,
Yeah.
Right.
470 feet. There's no streams that are,
Well, and
I guess they would like to regulate everything.
that brings a good point. There would be a grandfather provision, right? I mean, we're talking about new. I mean, I'm just saying it wouldn't be.
Bulldozing houses.
No, if you go into,
not
if you
gonna
did redevelopment in any of those areas, you're going to be subjected to
Right,
that.
right. So
Well-
if Tim wants to sell his house and the next guy wants to redevelop it, he's screwed.
Right. So yeah, I guess that's.
Let me talk about that. That was
Yeah.
actually the next point I wanted to bring up before I went
Okay.
to the Cara
There we go.
slide. So I went too fast. So with grandfathering, how that works is in the code, there are exceptions for pre-developed areas, highly disturbed areas, that if you have a condition, say where you have a road, it stops the buffer. If you have a hard surface, a driveway, you've developed that site, your buffer is going to stop there. So at the point that the existing condition has substantially impeded the function of the buffer stops it, that line, and that would not change.
Okay, so I'm aware of a case in our city that there's a person that owns some properties and they abut the creek. And right now, the buffer basically takes out most of that property, just the buffer we have right now. So that person is paying taxes on those properties and gets absolutely nothing out of it. He cannot use those properties, and especially if we increase the buffer. I think the buffers are what, 80 or 100 feet right now?
They vary based on the stream type, but anywhere from 50 to 200.
So the problem I have with any of this has always been that we're taking basically somebody that's been paying for a property to be able to be usable, and all of a sudden we just jerked the carpet right out from under them, and they can't use their property anymore because they didn't develop back, 20 years ago.
Right. And so there is that if you've not developed those impacted areas, you really can't expand into those. There's some minor exceptions for some minor expansions. As far as the taxation, that is really between the homeowner and the county. So the county isn't going to know on the tax rolls if you have critical areas or buffers on your site. So that would be up to that person to ask for a reduction at the county for those areas that they can't use. But yeah, I understand the other point of that financially, they don't get to may not get to fully use the property that they own.
But the issue is, Russ, that particular property owner's been paying tax on usable property. And because the regulation changed, that goes away. So he's paid $10, $20, $30, $50,000 in property taxes over the years. And as Kim indicated, the rug is pulled out from underneath that individual.
Sure. And that's not something we can control.
No,
We're
I get
saying
that, but
they
that's
can-
the fairness of the
Yeah.
issue is certainly not there. You talked about pre-developed rates right now, or when you analyze for storm drainage, we're already doing pre-development activity or analysis.
Yes.
Why do you think we can get away from that?
I'm
on our
not suggesting
analysis
we're
of
going to
buffers?
get away from that. What I'm saying is one state agency is reviewing an issue in a vacuum, and they're not considering that we're already having people do stormwater control at a pre-development rate, and then to have them do a riparian management zone at a pre-development rate, you're double mitigating for what you're trying to control, the stormwater.
Right, but that situation exists right now. That's what's happening right now.
Yeah, for
It's just a
stormwater.
smaller buffer.
Yeah.
And now we're expanding it for whatever reason. What's the difference between a stream and the lake?
Stream and the lake, they are both considered fish and wildlife conservation areas.
So you're talking 235 feet buffer.
The
on an
buffers on
undeveloped piece of
lakes are
property.
managed differently than they are on streams.
Well, and I guess what is the
That's-
difference between the stream and a lake?
A lot of it is going to get into the potential for fish habitat.
Where do the fish go after they're in the stream?
Right, but it's a more critical function in a river for rearing and for the fish that Department of Fish and Wildlife are going to be concerned about, your steelhead, your bull trout, your different types of salmons. That's why they're concerned more about the buffers and the habitat quality around the rivers and streams. Our lake, even though it has different species of fish that go in it, they're not threatened, listed, or other types of protected categories. So that's really where the distinction is going to lie. And other restrictions are made on the lake as to seasonal restrictions on when you can do particular activities.
Because the fish are in there.
Right.
I just have a scenario question, I guess, because I'm all for protecting our fish and our streams and all that. I mean, that's one of my favorite things about Lake Stevens. But we have a lot of neighborhoods here that have been around for a while, and they have fairly decent sized yards and a lot of green belts for some of our older homes. And one of their favorite things is the nature in their backyard. So this could potentially say they want to add a big deck on their backyard. Well, now it's within that buffer. They want to build a shed in their backyard. Well, now it's in the buffer. So it's literally taking away what our current homeowners can do with property. It may have been in their family for years. Maybe they bought it 10 years ago, maybe 5 years ago. You know what I mean? But they're looking to improve their property. I mean, they bought a place with a larger yard with possibly the dream of, we want to put a big deck out here where we're eventually going to put a shed over here. And now after the fact, they're being told they can't. Feels a little bit, it would feel a little bit to me, and I'm not saying this is what it is, but if I were the homeowner, a little bit like bait and switch, right? I bought a big yard because I wanted to put a deck. I wanted to build a shed. And now I can't do this because we've got a stream at the very back of our yard and it's within 250 feet of that stream. And that would be my concern, is taking away homeowners' rights that are already there.
I understand that.
Have we done any analysis as to the critical aquifer recharge area as to how many acres that is in our UGA?
I don't have that number right now, but I will bring you that number. But if you, on this slide, that shows you the area that's impacted. So it is the far northeastern corner of the city that becomes impacted. So
that whole circular area
and a lot of that's outside of this, most of that's outside of the city. It's just inside that little pink triangle.
Pink triangle.
So
Like
the bottom
Hartford
quadrant
and
of the
Gray.
picture.
So essentially our industrial area.
The
Yeah.
north part, yeah.
It most heavily impacts our industrial area. And then our well site is also probably a candidate site that hasn't been mapped yet.
So what would a potential mitigation be to protect your critical aquifer recharge area if you want to build a warehouse on 5 acres?
It's not so, well, it's probably your stormwater system's going to be further enhanced than it is. And there might be some sort of a separation, but really it's looking at, what's the intended use within a distance to that aquifer zone, but it's really how are you controlling and treating your stormwater?
Okay.
So I want to make sure I'm clear on what we're balancing here, because I think it's been pretty well articulated, the concerns of a property owner. The goal behind these types of regulations are to protect the quality of the water in that area right around it. And so I guess, as an expert, you and your team, do you feel that we are sufficiently protecting these bodies of water already? I mean, you mentioned the first 100 feet or where we get the maximum benefit. And so with other strategies, the ones you mentioned, are we doing a good enough job? As a council member, do I need to look at protecting these in a more aggressive way? Or, are we doing a good enough job that we can afford to allow property owners to continue to enjoy the property that they've been paying taxes on or maybe bought with a specific goal in mind?
So I will start with this science continually evolves. There were points in time where our wetland buffers and stream buffers were as little as 25 feet. Every few years, they do definitely grow. And so I would have to trust that, what the state agencies have published, and Fish and Wildlife has authorized this alternative methodology as being adequate when you are getting the majority of the function in that first 100 feet. So I would agree with that, balancing the difference between a rural and an urban environment. In a rural area, sure, let's have a 200-foot wide buffer that can have large trees. In a city, that's probably our number one complaint from people who live next to stream corridors, green belts is, if there's a 75-foot tall tree, I don't think there's a 200-foot tree in Lake Stevens, but if there's a 50 or a 70-foot tall tree, those are a concern to people in properties with small backyards.
There's 4 less 135-foot trees.
Okay. Because I guess the thing I just want to make sure of is that, yes, people have rights to their property and pay taxes, and I absolutely respect that. But I also don't think that necessarily grants license to disrupt and destroy, a body of water that feeds into a public resource. And so I just want to make sure we're balancing that appropriately.
Yes.
Russ, that distinction between urban and rural, though, that argument has been posed before to Department of Wildlife and DOE, and it hasn't garnered any steam whatsoever. So why do you suspect that we are going to be able to make that argument again?
What I'm suggesting is they have their base code. Okay, do this and go do whatever, and we won't talk to you. Or if you want to do something different, here's a different strategy that other communities have done successfully. And I just bring up in my own analogy, the difference between an urban and a rural area. And I'm saying a larger buffer, in my opinion, is appropriate in a rural area versus in an urban area. And then I would go back to, as part of our design and other zoning regulations, we have a variety of other tools that are going to make sure that dirty water's not going into streams. I mean, having a grass yard in itself.
Yes, and I agree with your analysis, but that hasn't been allowed in the past, though. It
I mean,
hasn't
like
been
the model-
approved.
The alternative model I'm proposing has been allowed by DFW and some other cities in the vicinity. And they, in fact, are the ones who said, if you want to do something different, take a look at these.
Is it correct that in this critical area ordinance update, we have to do one or the other?
Yes.
We have to expand the buffers, either the 235 feet or this alternate proposal that is fewer feet, but takes into account the mitigation issues that we're doing in regards to stormwater management.
Yeah, and
Okay.
fully
Which has a-
vegetative buffers.
And do we have to just do one or the other in our whole area? Or do we have the opportunity to have larger buffers in some areas and the smaller buffers in other areas?
I think we could propose that. We'd had a discussion with them about the 50-foot buffers that we have for our seasonal streams, the ones that were described earlier as being like a foot wide. And they're still pretty adamant that, no, they want to have those still go up to that kind of 100-foot type buffer. So I think we could go larger in some areas, but I don't know that they would let us go smaller
Got it.
than the alternative methodology.
Sure. Okay, thanks.
Okay. So I'll just go through the summary slide. So it's everything we've already been talking about. It seems like there's probably an appetite to explore this alternative methodology. We're going to continue to work with the state agencies. Our Surface Water Division, they gave you a presentation about their basin plan. This really sort of ties into that basin planning methodology. And back to your question, Councilmember Jorstad. One of the things we do want to explore to them as sort of a trade-off is, can we use some of these basin areas, for example, the Grade Road site? Would they allow us to reduce other buffers if we're using that as a mitigation bank? So there's still some more things we do want to explore. So we, again, I would rather we put our effort in an area like that where I know there's a direct benefit for breeding coho versus somewhere where we might get a stickleback every 5 years.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
and we've gone through some questions. So I guess I do want to get some fairly firm direction from the city council how to move forward. Again, we've sort of talked about, we have some really minor updates, some housekeeping, really not going to do anything with our geologically hazardous areas. So those are steep slopes, maybe what are called liquefaction zones where the soil might collapse. We have like small areas in the city. Our wetlands are fine. We just need to have a little bit more description around habitat corridors around wetland areas, fairly minor change. But the big change obviously is adding this critical aquifer recharge area section. We've never had that before, and we do have those in our city now. So we have to adopt those, and that protects wellheads, drinking water. And the biggest change, again, goes back to how do we want to manage streams? So just looking to council if you think staff is on the right path, or if you want to go the other direction and go to the more restrictive buffers, we can also move that direction. So we just wanted to provide you with some options tonight so we know how to proceed and take this to the next steps. So I'm going to start with Councilmember Hilt. I'm just going to put you all on the spot. So,
I like the path you're going.
okay. Councilmember Jorstad.
I'm a little torn. I mean, you know, in a perfect world, I would prefer the larger buffers based on what we know today and what the science says. And I totally understand the competing requirements that the Growth Management Act puts on us, and the requirements that we grow at a certain rate and that we provide certain levels of housing and employment to our citizens. I feel like that what you're proposing strikes a balance. So I don't know if that's an answer, but that's where I'm at. Yeah. Thanks.
Councilmember Peter Sagan.
And that is not even accurate.
No, I guess I would just maybe suggest to the council to consider that these two maps that we have in our package are just stream buffers. They're not stream and associated wetland buffers. If you were look at the stream that goes up Caleb Road and up towards Sunnycrest and so forth and up the hill. If you were to look at this map, you would think that there was developable property in here. That's simply not true. So when you take the stream buffer and apply it on there, there's also associated wetlands that are connected to those streams. So those buffers are significantly larger than what's on this map.
We can bring you a composite map that we didn't tonight.
Yeah.
So are you saying that'll increase the overall buffer, or the river one will
Certainly.
cut into the
You
wetland?
better believe it. I
Yeah.
mean, this property right here is undevelopable as is.
A lot of everything along that corridor.
That whole corridor through here. I mean, this corridor up here is what Kim was talking about. The wetland buffer is up in this area.
So does increasing the river one change anything then?
So why, yeah, why wouldn't we
From the
have
edge of
the,
the wetland, yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yes,
Oh,
this is just
so
talking
there's-
about stream buffers. It's not talking about wetland buffers, correct?
Right, the wetland buffer. In the example that you're talking about along Callow Road, the streams run through the wetlands. So the stream buffers would most
Push out
be
the,
inside the wetland or within the wetland.
so then why,
wait, yeah,
why wouldn't we use the largest buffer possible if the land is undevelopable?
And we could in those areas. Just
It's
talking
all,
about
I mean, it's
management.
already utilized.
It's already ate up land,
These,
right?
these areas you can't develop anyway.
Sure.
That's why they're city
Unless you
developed.
tried to redevelop.
So.
I guess then, I mean, in that sense, it seems to make sense that there would be some places where we would
That's something we could look at.
be supportive of the larger buffers because it doesn't impact whether we can or can't develop that land.
We'll map that. Did you have any other comments?
We need to make every effort to minimize the impacts on the properties within our UGA because this, as you indicated, a number of years ago, buffers were 25 feet. Then they went to 75 feet and then 120, now 150. Now we're up to 200, depending on what type of fish are in the stream. And it's not about lineal footage. It's about the quality of the buffer. And this nonsense about increasing footage just because it's getting to a point where we don't have anything. And then where the mandate is to provide affordable housing. I mean, come on, you talk about the aquifer recharge area. It's like to put together a storm drainage system to address that on the scenario that I suggested, a warehouse or something. Again, you're adding costs all the time. Our storm drainage systems are so sophisticated right now. It's incredible. So it's just kind of crazy. I would say we need to do everything possible to minimize the impacts on our UGA.
Councilmember Daughtry.
Well, I have a long memory, and the conflicting rules that we get out of Fish and Wildlife and DOE and all that other stuff when we went into just the plan that we did in 2010, which, really irked me because of the biologist that sat in the room over there and said I didn't understand the science when, yeah, okay, great. Nuclear physicist, okay, great. So I'm agreeing with the conflicting rules. I mean, how do, every time we turn around, somebody else comes up with something, and then that's a conflicting rule of somebody else that also has jurisdiction over what we do. And this is where all this kind of stuff comes from. And I agree that science moves on and it gets better and better and better. But I also think that a lot of that has to do with job security for biologists. So I think that I'm like Gary. We need to try to get this down to where we can use it for our UGA. And I don't think there's too many 285-foot trees around here. I remember where there was 4 235 footers, but they're no longer there either. So that's a problem. And, I don't really understand the 285-foot tree. Was it in the middle of the stream? And, kind of weird to they come up with that analogy.
Right.
I mean, the 285 feet is not really based on a tree. It's based on the riparian area. And so I don't understand where they're coming up with an analogy with a 285-foot tree or 35 tree.
Shade potential and variety of other things, but we need to get into those.
Right. So I'm along with Gary. I think that we need to protect the wetlands. We need to protect the streams. We need to protect the lake, and we also need to protect our UGA and make it as usable as possible. And as a side note, we need to figure out how to protect some of our citizens on when they're losing their properties. So where we go to the council or city council or county council, or we go to the state and try to figure out how to make reparations for those people that lose those things based on changing science. There's got to be something we can do about that. And I just don't know where to go for that, but I'm totally interested in doing it.
Sounds like your next legislative agenda. Councilmember Shipman.
I'm for the mix. If we can possibly do a mix where, within our UGA, if it's buildable, then we'll do something modified, where we can use the land we have. Where it's not buildable, then I think larger buffers are certainly reasonable. My biggest concern are for our citizens that are already here, people that already live here, raise their families here. And then we pass something that they've maybe worked towards and saved towards, and we just knock them out at the knees and say, nope, sorry, no deck for you. I just think that's just wrong. And I'm not sure we can mitigate that really, or somehow make that up to them, because buying a home, as we all know, is most people's largest purchase. Not an easy thing to do. Upkeep of a home, not an easy thing to do. Keeping up on taxes, but not, so they've done all the right things and maybe saved and worked forward to something. And now they can't move forward with it because the stream that they loved when they bought their house is now that they maybe have taken good care of even, is now preventing them from doing the things they dreamt about doing with their homes. That to me is honestly my biggest concern. Because if it's already on wetlands, we already can't build on it, then okay. But impinging on people's rights that already are living on that property, have purchased that property prior to, that really bothers me.
Okay. And I think we can, might be some areas we can address that concern. Member Donahue?
So I think you're on the right track insofar as that I think the number one concern should be protecting the resource. But to the extent we can do that with other tools and minimize the impact on property owners along, these streams and I think that's what we should do, you know. I'm not in a position to say the science is wrong or right, or it's, you know, how often it's going to change. I defer to you and your team and the other people on the city staff to say whether or not we're doing an adequate job of protecting these resources. Once we hit that threshold, then there shouldn't be any reason for us to encroach further into private property rights. So that would be my desire.
Russ, I have one question for you. On the recommended WDFW on the 200-foot buffer, if you were to apply that buffer, there would be no lawn area in Lundin Park. So does that go away?
No, it's,
You don't recognize a new buffer?
no, it only becomes effective, well, the buffer would be adopted. The existing conditions stay as they are unless there's a trigger.
So if we were to redevelop Lundin Park somehow, at a
At
future
buildings
date.
or some things, yeah, there could be potential
Yeah.
impacts to the city resources.
Well, and, you know, on our list is to redo, you know, remodel, clean up the building that's on there. So would that impact that?
With Lundin Park, and I'm going to generally say that would be one of the sites that would have pre-developed conditions that probably intersect the stream, because the stream is on the eastern side of that park. Between there, you have playgrounds, you have paths, you have picnic shelters. So those would be some of the examples. You have a very developed site and you've sort of lost the function where that intensive development starts. And I'm just trying to think of the site from my memory right now.
So the buffer will have already ended before you get to the
To the
bathroom area. Yeah.
And that's
Picnic shelter grass would, because it isn't currently there, is something that would affect.
yeah, the recreation of the park could go away. Yeah, you'd have bathrooms.
So does that give you the direction you were looking for?
does. I appreciate the conversation.
Okay. And any other,
I'll just throw in my 2 cents on this, you know, as politicians and legislators, every day pound the table about affordable housing. And then they allow this to happen, right? Everyone wants clean everything, right? But we sit here and we talk over and over, oh, we're going to create affordable housing. We're going to create affordable housing. Well, part of affordable housing is having land to build a house on. And every time we do buffer extensions like this, it reduces that land. So now instead of having 100 houses that you could build, you're only going to build 80, but you still have 200 people that want that house. And you're never going to get to affordable housing. So when politicians talk affordable housing and they have no idea what they're talking about and they support the increase of encumbrance on the buildable lands we have, it's a joke. My 2 cents.
I don't think the buffer size is what's causing there to be a lack of development of affordable housing.
You don't think so?
No.
Take 5 acres and run a creek down the middle of it and put 200 feet on each side of it.
well, that's what Cameron's going to get us, right?
Thanks, Cameron.
All right. Any final thoughts? Okay, that was our last item. Thank you very much, everybody, for your